welcome everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Before we begin, I just wanted to share with everyone a great opportunity that Learn Tourism is offering all of you who attend today, and that is a discount to our upcoming virtual symposium in November. So we are planning an awesome online educational event that is going to focus in on tourism stewardship. We've got some great speakers and teachers that are going to come with us. So I wanted to just share the link in the chat for everyone. Also, if you use the code LEARN, you will get $15 off attending. This is going to be a really fun event where we talk about a lot of different subjects related to putting stewardship first and what it means to have responsible tourism in action in your communities. So we do an in-person conference every year called the Learn Tourism Conference. This will be our first time doing an online virtual symposium, and we hope that this will be an annual event that you can participate in. So if you look at this link, you'll be able to dig into the 4 different workshops we'll be having in this half-day event, and you'll also get to learn a little bit about our instructors. And again, if you use the code LEARN, all caps, you will be able to get $15 off. So feel free to email me if you have any questions about this. We're really excited to have everyone join us. And this is a topic that our Learn Tourism team is just very passionate about. So we really can't wait to have people come and share their experiences, tell us what's happening in your state, in your region, and things like that. Today, the thing I'm most excited about is our special guest, Heidi Schlag with a Heritage Tourism Studio. I met Heidi a few years ago at a MAPRA event with some other amazing tourism and public relations folks. But I was really struck by Heidi's work with DMOs, museums, heritage areas, scenic byways, main streets, cultural organizations, because I'm a giant history nerd. And most of what I do when I'm traveling is go to the places that she has supported. And I see it as such an integral part of how you tell the story of a place, right? To include all of that heritage and history and culture. It's something that I personally love as a traveler, even outside of my professional life, to really integrate myself into the culture of where I go. So Heidi has 25 years of experience in this work, in leadership, in marketing communications, and in tourism strategy. And I'm really excited because I think her insight really strengthens visitor engagement. It helps support local economies, and it really extends the impact of heritage tourism, because a lot of times when you uncover the story of heritage and history and culture, you realize it's not just about one place. It starts to connect all the places, right? And so it creates more of an ecosystem for people to experience, and it gives people more opportunities to dig deeper when they are in your destination and visiting your community. So Heidi, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited for you to share your insights, and I can see everyone's answering this poll. So I'm going to take a look at these results, and so cool because we have a lot of different folks joining us today. We've got destinations and CVBs and chambers. We've got state, city, county governments. We've got historical attractions and museums. We've got cultural organizations and programs. We've got people who are handling history and heritage cultural events, right? Which is awesome. We can see a lot of folks are committed at this time to community stewardship, which I think is a big part of this conversation. And a lot of you feel like this is an extremely important topic or a somewhat important topic to the work that you're doing. So I think we've got a great crowd. We've got a perfect guest, and I'm going to let Heidi take it away.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm going to share, I have a short deck and just some overall remarks about how I view heritage tourism and where I see the field going in the next few years. And then I really am interested in hearing from all of you and having just a really good conversation about how all of this is playing out in your organizations. I'm glad to see on the poll that we have a really wide mix of places, of organizations represented here. So I think we'll be able to have a rich conversation. So just share my screen here. Okay. So hopefully we have slides.
We're looking
So
good. All
thank
set.
you. You never want to be presenting without your slides. So the way I wanted to start today was to take a look at some of these travel trends. These keep popping up on my LinkedIn feed and in my inbox, and I'm sure that you all are seeing these also. The trends have been pretty consistent over the past couple of years, and really I feel like all of these are getting stronger. What we're seeing is that travelers want to get away from their technology and have authentic experiences. They want to get off of the beaten path, find those hidden gems, and visit the places that locals love, not necessarily the tourist traps in a destination. They want meaningful connections, and they're looking for unique hands-on learning opportunities that can be analog hobbies, historic trades, or culinary or agricultural skills. They don't want to just check things off of a list. They really want to experience a destination. And when I look across all of these trends, I keep coming back to the same question, which is how do destinations create the kinds of experiences that today's travelers are looking for? So, like you, I'm sure you've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I do too. And I, of course, start with how I plan trips. And Sarah alluded to this also. I am a history person. So I always start with wanting to know what the history of a location is. So to just illustrate this for you, I'm going to use the planning process that I went through when I went to Edinburgh a few years ago. So when I started my planning process, like most people, I visited the DMO website. I visited their social media. I visited TripAdvisor, looking at what the top sites were in Edinburgh that I wanted to put on my list. I then also started reading about the history of Edinburgh to make sure that there were, if I was getting a representative sample of the history that was available in the city. Now, this trip planning occurred in 2023, so AI was not as ubiquitous as it is now. Today, obviously, if we're starting trip planning, we'd probably start with our AI chatbot and see what it suggested. Of course, AI has its own problems, which we'll get into in a little bit with trip planning, in that it is almost always going to suggest the most popular places, which creates its own issues with over tourism and sustainability issues. We're not going to get into that topic today, but AI in particular is really surfacing these top attractions, and so does TripAdvisor. So does the DMO website. So what I end up looking for as I'm trip planning, and I think the travel trends that we looked at are indicating that people are also looking for, is some of these deeper questions. So I want to know what places tell the story of Edinburgh. Where can I visit to understand its history and to understand the culture of the city today? I want to know how that city has changed over time and what stories are shaping its future. And I want to know where I can have an experience that feels uniquely Edinburgh. And those these tend to follow the traveler's preferences, right? So I'm looking particularly at history, but an art lover might be centering art in their planning. The same for music, food, if you're a foodie, theater, or wanting to interact with the locals. So these trends that I started the presentation off with indicate that today's travelers aren't just looking for a list of attractions. What they're really looking for is places that can help them understand the destination and not just the past, the history of the destination, but what its story is today and where it is headed in the future. So as I contemplate travel and travel planning, it all really comes back to connection. Visitors are looking for that deeper understanding of place, and stories are the way that visitors connect to a place. So the stories are numerous. They can relate to the history, the people who shaped the destination, the culture that exists there today, what those traditions are, what the celebrations are, the identity of a community, the future of that destination. So continuing my Edinburgh example, Edinburgh Castle holds part of the story of Edinburgh. The National Museum of Scotland holds a part of that story. The Royal Mile, all of the historic district, the shops and the shopkeepers on the Royal Mile all hold a part of that story. And so does the Scottish Whiskey Experience, the Blue Blazer pub. And even, it's hard to see in this picture, but there's a crane in the background of this image, which is why I chose it, which I think was a nice juxtaposition between the old part of Edinburgh and the future of the city. What are they building? Where are they headed? So together, all of these different places can create an experience for a visitor that is larger than just a collection of stories that begins to create a connection to the place. And that's what travelers are really looking for when they're saying they want authenticity, meaningful experiences, and deeper engagement. They're seeking that connection to place. And in my opinion, that's what heritage tourism really does best. It helps the visitor understand where the community has been, where it is today, and where it's going. And that's what today's travel trends are pointing towards. Travelers aren't just looking for attractions. They are looking for the experiences that help them understand a destination and feel connected to it. So as I start thinking about destinations as this collection of stories rather than just a collection of attractions, something else becomes clear. And that is that visitors follow journeys, not just jurisdictions. So I've spent a lot of my career working with collaborations. I work with MAPRA. For those of you who don't know that acronym, it's the Mid-Atlantic Tourism Public Relations Alliance. So it's a group of 80 DMOs who work together to promote the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. I work with scenic byways, I work with heritage areas, and other regional tourism initiatives. And what I've learned through this work and through my own travel is that visitors don't experience these destinations the same way organizations do. Most tourism product is developed around the organizational model. So you have your county DMO who produces a destination guide about their county. You have a state DMO that publishes tourism product relevant to their state. And I understand, I work in the field, so I understand that's how the funding works, that your funding is tied to driving visitation and driving hotel stays in your jurisdiction. But the trouble comes when a visitor tries to plan a trip, because visitors, and especially like me going to Edinburgh, I don't understand all of the various tourism assets they have there. I'm just trying to understand how best I can connect to that place. So when I'm faced with a wall of brochures that were all produced by these different organizations, it can become very confusing, and it makes it very challenging for a visitor to plan a trip. So one of the answers to this, of course, is that visitors, instead of planning by boundary, plan by interest. I mentioned that earlier, that they're going to center their plans around whatever their particular niche is. So, for instance, if somebody is interested in Civil War history, they aren't just going to stop at a county line. They're going to follow the story that's being told. So, up on the screen, this is an example of Civil War Trails, which is a large network of sites on the Eastern Seaboard telling the story of Civil War history. And they enable the visitor to follow the story across jurisdictions. The success of the Civil War Trails project demonstrates that the power of organizing experiences around a narrative instead of a jurisdiction is really popular. And I know we have some folks who aren't from the East Coast. So if you're not familiar, they have these maps for every state, which lead you to these waysides that you see on the left there. And they do a fabulous job working with the local jurisdictions to pull stories about the Civil War, the battles that happened there, the people who experienced the Civil War. They put these waysides in the ground and really allow the visitor to stand in the footsteps of these history makers. Another example, this is from the East Coast also, I live in Frederick, Maryland, is the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad byway. Here, the visitors following the story of Harriet Tubman. This byway connects landscapes, communities, historic sites, and experiences across multiple jurisdictions. I know the map on the left is small, but this full byway actually runs through 12 counties in 3 states, so Maryland, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. And this interpretation is the thread that ties all of this together. The image on the right where it says Blackbird is just one page out of this booklet that is really allowing the story to speak, where they're telling very specifically what makes this particular place important. So as the visitor arrives at this place, they have some context. This is particularly important in this case because this is not a museum or a location that has a docent and open hours where there's interpretation. It's largely a field. So this enables this particular place to live, even though there is nobody staffing it. So in both cases, the story becomes the organizing principle. One reason I think that byways, heritage areas, trails, and cultural corridors are so valuable is because they help individual places connect to a larger experience. And those connected experiences align with what those trends are telling us that the visitors are looking for: deeper exploration, authentic experiences, off the beaten path discovery, slower travel, and longer stays. And that last one is particularly important to DMOs. I hear all the time, how can we lengthen the length of stay? So heritage tourism is one of the keys to that. So once we start viewing destinations through the lens of stories and journeys rather than just individual attractions, another opportunity emerges. Stories don't just connect places, they help the visitors to find experiences that they may not have ever found. And particularly as we enter the age of AI, and AI is surfacing only the most popular locations in a destination, helping visitors find the authentic, off the beaten path experiences becomes even more important and helps to differentiate what the work that DMOs and other tourism organizations do as we fight the fight against AI taking over all of the work that we do. So connected experiences create longer stays. We have research that shows that. And this is just a simple chart that sort of shows all of the different places that a heritage traveler could touch during a visit: museums, main streets, restaurants, taking a byway to explore historic sites and state parks, wineries and theaters, while spending multiple nights in a hotel, whether they're staying in the same hotel in a hub and spoke model, or if they're having more of a linear experience. Both are valid ways of exploring a destination. And creating itineraries, trails, and other tourism products around these stories and themes really helps a visitor to move throughout the destination, becoming connected to all of the different pieces of the story that live in all of the locations along the journey. When visitors travel like this, they're more likely to spend additional time in the destination, explore a wider geographic area, discover lesser known attractions, support more local businesses, and have a more meaningful and memorable experience, which then allows them to want to return for future visits, tell their friends and family, and become an ambassador for the location. So who holds these stories? So as I've worked with my clients over the years, one thing I've come to appreciate is just how many stories a community has. Some of those stories are really well documented. They're at the museums, on exhibit panels. They're in your archives and libraries, your historians. Very easy to find and turn into content and into tourism product. But there's a lot of other stories out there held by Main Street business owners, artists, community organizations, or long-term residents who don't even think of themselves as story keepers. And how do we gather all of them? This is how I picture this. I had AI create this image for me because this is what is in my head as I work with my clients, and I'm trying to figure out how to pull all of these stories into some coherent themes that they can then begin to build tourism product around. No single individual has a complete picture of the stories that make any one place unique. So that makes it difficult for you as destination tourism professionals to fully understand and communicate what differentiates your particular location from the destination right next to you. Every community has restaurants, shopping, outdoor recreation, festivals, and events. And those things are important, but they're rarely what makes a destination truly distinctive. As we've been underlining through this whole presentation, it's the stories that happen in that location and could only happen in that location that make the destination unique. So how can a DMO capture these stories, much less turn them into a compelling campaign or content? So obviously the opportunity here, and I'm sorry to tell you, I do not have a solution to this yet, but maybe somebody on the phone does, is how finding better ways to identify, organize, and connect the stories so we can be more effective communicating with our visitors. So I've been experimenting with this with my use of AI as I work with some of my clients to see if AI is a possible solution in that it's able to scan large quantities of information and find commonalities much quicker and more effectively than we could ever do ourselves. So while other people are interested in using AI to create content, I'm really looking at how it can help us to discover these patterns, themes, and connections within the stories that already exist within our community. So just some top line thoughts as we then will move into our conversation about all of this is, as I think about the future of heritage tourism, I keep coming back to a few ideas. History and culture are among the strongest differentiator communities have. And finding and communicating how those differences make us different and stronger than our neighbors is how we're going to compete with AI. Second, the stories that make destinations unique already exist within our communities. Third, no single organization owns the story of place. And finally, the opportunity that I see here is using collaboration, technology, and interpretation to make those stories easier to discover and to experience. As I said, I don't have all of the answers. We're still figuring it out, all of this out together, especially because AI changes so quickly. I also just want to underline a conversation Sarah and I had before we opened the room about the influence of the 250th, which is rapidly approaching, how the 250th has helped to increase interest in history and has improved the collaborative nature of all of these organizations around Revolutionary War and American history themes. So I hope that that will continue as we advance out of 2026. So I'm going to, in a second, stop sharing. But just before I do, I wanted to let everyone know that if this is a topic of interest to you, I am hosting a series of 4 free virtual conversations that beginning Monday. And I've asked 4 experts in Jake is an expert. Not only he works for a DMO, but he has also worked for history museums in the past and really understands how those 2 organizations can work together. Wanda Maloney is an expert in dealing with scenic byways and heritage corridors. Heidi Schlag spends a lot of time working with Main Street communities and other small communities. And Laura Charles is a outdoor rec expert who also spends a lot of time at the intersection of heritage tourism. So we're going to discuss all of these subtopics as they relate to heritage tourism and get input from the group, share ideas. So if that is of interest to you, I hope that you will join us. And I am going to stop sharing and invite Sarah back.
Hey, thank you so much. And just so everyone knows, when I send out the recording and the slide deck, I will make sure there's a link to Heidi's series because I think drilling down into those specific areas is really powerful. I want to just highlight a few things, Heidi, that really stood out to me as you were sharing. One, I think, just to be clear about what I said earlier, it's not just history nerds that engage with the history and the heritage, because I think culture is what makes each place or experience special. And the truth is, it's the history and the heritage that built the culture that people are
Absolutely.
engaging with. So when people come to your destination or they come to your attraction, they come to your museum, whatever it is, they are wanting to contact the culture of that place. And that's a natural connection in. So even though I might be a super history nerd, it's still going to work for people that don't consider themselves those nerds. And I also think that part of the stewardship that I see happening in this conversation is that when we look at history and heritage, we look at where the community comes from, in addition to looking at where the community is going. That part of stewardship, where we contact history and heritage is really around, I think, engaging our locals and our residents and really making them feel a part of what we're
Mhm.
building in tourism. That's become a bigger and bigger issue across the
Right.
world. We really need the people who live in a place to support the promotion of that place, to support people coming into that place. And we need to make sure we're attracting the people that are going to work well with our community. So when we look at heritage and history, we honor that sort of background and we connect it to what's happening now. I do think that opens up a doorway to a type of stewardship that really has to do with your resident sentiment and really with building that relationship with your community while you're building the relationship with your visitors, your existing and potential visitors. So I think that's really powerful. I also love that you use Scotland as an example because I just took my mother there on a dream trip. We did Ireland and Scotland together. Her family is from Ireland. And one of the unique things that I did was I was able to, after she spent 3 years on ancestry.com, to export all of her ancestry information and build her an
Mhm.
itinerary where we drove all over Ireland to places that no one else cares about, but we care about them because it's where her
Absolutely.
family lived, worked, got married, died, and was buried, right? So I took her on this really great trip that I built through just using Google Gemini on my own, but it allowed me to take my own heritage and history our family heritage and history and then immediately link it to the heritage and history of a place that I had never been. And I felt like the trip was quite profound. So I do think where we're going with technology is that technology isn't just going to change how we discover things, it's going to change what we discover when we're there. And so I think for those of you that are working with museums, with heritage trails, with all sorts of different types of experiences that are connected to the culture of your community, the truth is you are going to have a more, I think, big opportunity to connect with people maybe that you've never connected with before or that you were having trouble connecting with. I think maybe down the road, AI will become like everything else and there'll be lots of ads and we'll be back where we started. But right now, we're all going to enter this sort of like opportunity like we did when social media first came out. And it levels the playing field for a while. And it
Mhm.
allows not just you all as people who are, like I said, the guardians of the experience and of the place and of the stories, but it's actually going to help the traveler themselves really tap into things that they might not have found if they just were Google searching it old school the way we have been.
Right.
So I think that's going to be really interesting. I see a couple comments in here that I just want to mention in the conversation, which is great. I see Eric just brought up that him and his family just returned from a lengthy road trip across the northern US. And they didn't directly use AI, but they indirectly used it through Google searches about destinations and attractions. So if you haven't seen Google's changes yet, start Googling something. Their AI is really integrated now, and I think we're going to see that move forward. But I love that, Eric. You also use YouTube quite a bit for research and you use traditional print visitors guides as well. So we see that combination of people using multiple tools. I still might want that visitor guide in my hand, but I'm still going to be able to ask questions on my phone to Google anytime I need it. And that makes a big difference, right? And I think too, you made a really good point that people are reacting to, Heidi, around how the stories are really about connecting all those people and the places. So that
Mhm.
graphic you created, I think, is really powerful because it's about us connecting to all the different ways the story plays out. But I think it's also the stories end up connecting people back into all these different parts of the community, depending on their values or depending on what they wanted to experience as experience travel becomes the focus.
And I'm sorry to
Jump in.
cut in, but your example of your trip with your mom to Scotland, I think is a perfect example of this because your mother was able to find so much more family history using technology than she ever could have even 10 years ago. And it's those granular stories that make travel personal. You had a very personal experience exploring Scotland. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that. And what I would like to challenge DMOs to do is to reach out to all of these story holders, especially I spend a lot of time working with museums and they don't always see themselves as tourist attractions. So they could use a little bit of insight from their local DMOs about what an important role they're playing in the tourism economy. And then how important all of that, they're the subject matter experts of your destination and how much value that information can be to the DMO. So I have, in my work, encourage as much of that collaboration as possible because I think that is what is going to help all of us stand out as AI continues to be able to churn out this information. AI cannot duplicate those personal stories.
Yeah, and Stephen, I see your comment about how culture and heritage are living topics, right? And I think that's such an important point to make because what we're living right now is history not too long from now. So it's like that's really that interconnected piece. It's we think of time as linear, but in a lot of ways, what we're talking about is all these things are integrated. They become one thing over time, right? So those personal experiences and personal stories that people have, I think it really is about the past and the future connecting into what's happening in the moment for people. And to your point, Heidi, I think it makes it so much more personal. I
Mhm.
now return to certain places in my travel because of my personal connection to them. And my experience in Ireland was so profound. And I loved Scotland as well. But the Irish part of our trip was so profound that I want to go back there over and over to continue that relationship,
Mhm.
right? Because it opened up something about my own history and heritage that I didn't know. And it gave my mom and I great insight into who we are, who her parents were, who her grandparents were. And I thought, to me, it just showed, like I said, it's not just about that we're going to change how we're discovering a place through technology, but we're actually going to be able to change for a while what it is that we're discovering, because the conversations you have with the technology can be so personalized, because the
Mhm.
data I can share with it can be so personalized. I have a few questions in here I want to address and have you answer. And I want to encourage everyone, please, if you have questions about challenges or things that you're facing, we want to talk about that as we wrap up today. But May Joy put in a question that I think is on everyone's mind, which is, what if the AI's info is wrong? If we're talking about tech and those type of changes, how are you talking to people about that? And I have certain ways I'm talking to folks about the quality control factor, but I'm curious what you're seeing in your work.
Yes, that is a big concern. I know in particular, museums spend a lot of time talking about this. One of the leading assets that museums have is trust. And they are very reticent to be putting all of their information in AI and losing that trust, losing the trust of the visitor. Also, we could spend another whole hour talking about how AI has biases built in, and that you just lose all of the nuance of interpretation that you can get when you're actually in a museum, learning from a guide or learning from a exhibit that has been well researched. So it is definitely an issue. And I wouldn't ever advise that you just take a history that you find on it and use it. I think you definitely need to fact check. You should have humans in the loop. And if you're able to talk to a curator or a subject matter expert, to make sure that you're verifying everything. And as I am working with clients, it is giving me themes, but I am going back and I am checking the sources. I ask it for its sources. I check the sources. And I haven't gotten there yet, but I am going to be doing interviews with the subject matter experts in the coming months. And I'm going to be fact checking everything that AI has told me to make sure that it's accurate and that the nuance is there. A lot of it is around the Native American communities in the area. So I want to be triply sure that what we end up putting forward to the client is an accurate representation.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you notating that as an important piece, because I think that's what Stephen was also alluding to with his comment about cultural and heritage tourism being living topics. So we aren't just talking about people that are no longer here. In a lot of ways, we are talking about communities of people or stories of people where there are still folks connected in a very real way to those stories. And so I think there has to be, like I said, this level of commitment to our quality control and to really thinking out from an empathetic perspective. How are we presenting this information? We're already doing that, I think, if we're dealing with history and heritage stories. But I think we're being asked to go to another level with the technology, because right now it isn't perfect. It can make mistakes. I do think, though, that there's a huge opportunity, especially with museums and heritage trails. And like I said, people that actually have a lot of the literal, tangible stories that we can connect with, that you have an opportunity, one, to really think about your website and the role that it's playing, and making sure that you are taking the content that you already have and putting that stuff online and sourcing that information and establishing yourself as a credible place to go, right? Because AI, in its sort of hallucinations and mistakes, is looking for the places on the internet where things are sourced, where there are backup information, where there's stuff that you can refer to and say, here is what we know happened. I think it's just like there's a huge opportunity right now to look at your website, to reevaluate what it's doing, to make sure that you are updating content, that you're sourcing information, and maybe even to expand into more first party content from your own voice, right? So that it's not just coming from Wikipedia or other places. How can you actually start to take that content and really put it out
Mhm.
yourself? And I think there's a big push towards that type of owned media because of what we're talking about. The AI sort of world is changing
Yeah.
how things are presented. So to anyone who has that out there, I think you can really think about that this year. How do you create content series and pieces that represent that credibility and that
Yeah.
authenticity?
I hearth cook at a local museum, and as I was there during the holiday season, I had two probably 10-year-old girls come through, and they pointed to the loom in the corner and said, "I know how to weave on a loom," like that, 1800s loom, and I said, "Oh, where did you learn to do that?" And they said, "YouTube." So there are creators out there who are creating content around these analog skills that I mentioned in my presentation. And the younger generations are eating it up. And I see that as a real opportunity for museums, but also tourism organizations who probably have more resources and better visit digital know-how than some of the smaller museums to be creating that content that really appeals to these younger generations, that is hitting these things that travelers are looking for: authenticity, skillcations, slow travel.
Yeah, and I see Eric was just mentioning his teenage daughter is really into consuming
Mhm.
that long form YouTube content, right? And so, yeah, I think we're seeing a big shift from our digital natives now in the world, some of whom are adults who have been accessing so much digitally, and now they are craving sort of experiences in different ways that maybe they learned about digitally, but then they can go and have that in a very tangible way. And I wanted to mention too, we have Danielle, who's with the American Indigenous Tourism Association on the call today. And they're a national DMO that's connected to a lot of the different tribes across the country. And so I think that they're a great resource when you want to fact check, when you
Mhm.
want to quality control the information when you're putting out, or if you feel like you need more training or knowledge about how to be empathetic or what questions to ask, you have organizations like them out there available to talk about these things. So I think no matter who you are, again, if you're a historical attraction, a heritage organization, if you're a DMO, a CVB, the truth is we really are in a place where if you're not sure, go
Yeah.
ask for support.
Ab
There are people that want to help you tell these stories. And I also want to encourage people, don't shy away from sometimes having the hard conversations with your own community. Sometimes people push back on different things. They have different opinions. Again, we've got all these different people and different stories, versions of the stories, right? In a lot of ways, we're trying to bring those things together again, so we can attract the right people to visit, so we can build stronger relationships in our community. And sometimes I think it's important just to ask questions and not be afraid that people might have different opinions, that they might have different perspectives. We're going to be navigating that anyway. So
Right.
I really try to encourage people to be curious and to listen first to what's going on when you feel like there's maybe competing stories, or maybe somebody feels like their story isn't represented, to really take that time to listen and figure out how you can bring those people together. And it might be that not everybody's going to get along. But again, if we can understand how things are interconnected, we can place the right people in the community together, just build those systems that you were showing us in the
Yeah.
slides, right? That can get
Absolutely.
people to stay longer, give them a different way to explore, tell the stories in ways that are more memorable or personally impactful
Yeah.
and things like that. So I know we've got just a couple minutes. I want to make sure there's no other questions or, like I said, feedback or comments you have about your community, how you're handling this stuff, how you're talking to people about it. If there's any other questions about technology, feel free to throw them out as we wrap up. Again, I do want to encourage folks that one of the other things you can do right now, if you're newer to AI, is really hop on one of the free AI systems, whether that's Meta or Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT. You don't even need to pay for them if you don't want. And really just ask questions. What does the AI know about the history of the area? What does it tell you? What does it know about the history of your own organization? What does it know about different things that as a community member, you probably have a lot of knowledge about? And you're able to really see like where is their accuracies, where is their inaccuracies, where are their problems. I think it's important for all of us in our communities in some ways to be auditing this stuff. I've certainly sent messages to my local DMO where I live to say, hey, your mind trip AI is making mistakes. Here's the mistakes it's making. And I feel like that's good community feedback. It's not a criticism. It's really me just saying,
Mhm.
hey, you might want to check this or check that, or talk to your people about making sure these stories are being told in a way doesn't leave anybody out. Things like,
And I think it's important too that all of these museums and cultural organizations remain in the AI conversation. If they aren't voicing their concerns and checking on the accuracy of this information, AI is going to get away from us. It's going to be decisions are going to be made by people prioritizing profit over accuracy. And I think that's just something I would really like to see the museum field try to address. Not an easy task, but
Yeah, and thanks for saying that, because I want to say to everybody, I don't care if you love AI or you hate it or you're somewhere in this giant spectrum in between. I'm okay if you're saying you never want to touch it, you never want to see it, because I think it's really important that we're all involved in the conversation and that we're all involved in taking leadership in how it is deployed and how it impacts our communities. So I think all opinions are welcome at the table. I think if you have thoughts and you want to take leadership in this conversation as part of your organization or your community, you should do that. You don't have to be technical. You don't have to be some person who feels like you know it all. None of us know it all. We're actually all learning together. That's what we're going to be doing all of this year, probably next year, probably the year after that. There's no level in which I think you can't be involved. And I think all opinions should be considered, because there are lots of risks. There are lots of things that we have to be talking about right now as we figure out how this is going to be deployed across our societies all over the world. And it is going to impact everyone, right? No matter whether they're locals or residents, whether they're politicians or they're just people who live and work there, we're all going to feel the impact of it. So don't be afraid to have your opinions and get involved and talk about it. So I did place the link in here. Again, if you're interested in more conversations about stewardship, please join us for our November 10th virtual symposium. You can use the code LEARN, all caps, for $15 off. And I will share with you all the information that Heidi has given us today by email on Friday. You can get access to her slides, to this recording, and ways to contact her and the Heritage Tourism Studio if you'd like to meet with her more. But we really appreciate you all being here. Most of all, Heidi, I am so grateful that you took the time out to be with
thanks
us,
for having me.
to share your knowledge and your wisdom. I hope that we will get to have additional conversations in the future.
Yep. I would
But
love that.
in the meantime, thank you all so much for joining us for our Learn Tourism Talks webinar. And keep an eye out on Friday. You will get an update on what we'll be talking about in July, which I'm also really excited about. So have a great rest of your week, and I will see you at our next Learn Tourism Talks webinar. Bye, everyone.